I'm telling you on my word, I ain't not running any shit. Well, that's not happening.
Embarrassing. Embarrassing. These are the days when I am so glad that I work for myself and I don't have an employer. What I'm about to say is why I can never be on TV. It's why I will never have an employer, because they gonna pull this up. Shout out to the self-employed girlies. We're here to talk about Cori Bush and the way that she has been unfairly maligned and sidelined, and how ridiculous that has been. We talk a lot about how crazy it is that our elected representatives in Congress are so rich. They're so wealthy. There's so much of the Congress, the body that is supposed to represent the people of the United States. There are people who have financial privilege and wealth that most people in this country they can't even imagine. And one of the reasons why that happens is because the financial costs of just being a representative are so great. There was a time when representatives used to try to rent in Washington, D.C. and take care of their families back home. That's pretty much not a thing anymore. We live in such a politically polarized time where people have to be worried about their safety. How do you manage? Do you fly first class? Do you take private cars? Do you take public transportation? Do you hire your own security? You can't do that if you're not wealthy before you get to Congress. If you are trying to advocate for the rights of everyday people, of average people, of working class people, of low income people, you always have to be concerned if you are an elected, particularly if you're in the House of Representatives and you have to run every 2 years. You always have to be concerned about being primaried and being outraised, being outspent in advertising. That is a situation that ultimately lost Cori Bush, who formerly, well, I guess she represents the 1st District of Missouri until January of next year. That's the situation that she was placed in. And she did end up, unfortunately, losing her primary. This is Representative Cori Bush. In 2020, Cori Bush defeated Lacey Clay to represent the 1st District of Missouri. It primarily consists of St. Louis. And she became, in 2020, which is only 4 years ago, the first Black woman elected to the House of Representatives from the Show Me state. She was 44 at the time. Cori Bush has a really interesting biography. She was a relatively young mom. She had her first child when she was 24 years old. She's talked at length about the difficulties that she had, the kind of financial struggles that she's faced. She's talked about being homeless. She's talked about sleeping in her car. She's talked about not being able to afford food for herself and her children. And that motivates, animates the kinds of public policy positions that she has taken while she has been in the House.
That was President Biden last hour saying that we, the general public, will hear in the next hour or so from the CDC on a replacement for the now expired national moratorium that had drastically reduced the number of evictions that took place in this country during the coronavirus pandemic. It comes amid increased pressure for another extension from the White House by people like our next guest, Congresswoman Cori Bush, who at one time in her life was homeless. She has spent the last few nights sleeping on the Capitol steps. A couple minutes ago, Senator Elizabeth Warren came out to show her support. And in the last hour, Senator Chuck Schumer and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were also there.
There's no reason why people should be in a position to where they're hurting right now, risking eviction with this money sitting there. Let us not leave a dime on the table.
We cannot have these people lose their homes. Now they have a fighting chance. We got to get the money out, but the credit goes to these folks here and those folks there.
I said from the beginning that I'm here until we have the eviction moratorium in place. So we'll see. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to the announcement from the CDC, hopefully coming up very soon.
Yeah.
And if it is what we asked for, we should be able to go, because there was no real start to this. Like, there was no announcement and all of that. So there's really no end to this. I want to go home and get back to the people of St. Louis and make sure that they know that their congresswoman stands with them and that I'm out here. I want to be able to go to our local governments and say, what can we do to help make sure that we're streamlining the process for our people? So this work may be done sitting here on the steps, but the work in our communities is big. And so we have to go ahead and tackle that.
So that was video from 2021, shortly after Cori Bush was elected to Congress. She and other people who wanted to advocate for prolonging the eviction moratorium. She advocated for extending the eviction moratorium by sleeping on the steps of the Capitol with a bunch of people. That effectively drew attention to her cause, that brought more powerful Congresspeople on board, like Elizabeth Warren, like Chuck Schumer, who is now the Senate Majority Leader, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And she underscores again and again that it is the responsibility of Congress to protect the people, that this is supposed to be a representative government, a representative democracy that works for everybody, where everybody's needs are met. I think that is a really good example of taking a stand and using attention for advocacy, not just using attention to raise your profile, to get in magazines, to be invited to dinners, to go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It is unfortunate that I can't name a whole bunch of instances where I can say, oh yeah, there are so many other times I've seen Congresspeople do similar things. That really stands out to me. And as soon as I heard about the fight that Cori Bush was in, I immediately thought of that because it is so important and so rare. Cori Bush, young mom, experienced lots of financial struggles early on. She eventually obtained a nursing degree in 2008. Like many people, she was drawn to activism in Ferguson, Missouri after the killing of Michael Brown in 2014. After that, she decided to pursue a political path. She ran for Senate in 2016. She ran for House in this district in 2018, and she finally won in 2020. Cori Bush is a member of a group affectionately known as the Squad. Unfortunately, now the Squad is 2 members down. Both Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman have lost their primaries, and they are progressives who advocate generally for Medicare for all and the equitable redistribution of wealth and the Green New Deal. Things that seem fairly, obvious, right? Things that don't seem particularly radical to my mind. But in the context of the Democratic Party, Cori Bush has always been outspoken. She has drawn criticism sometimes for the way that she approached things. I've seen other Congresspeople refer to her as quote unquote disruptive or too loud, but she has been holding on. Things got particularly bad for Cori Bush after October 7th.
Bush's stances on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have come into sharper focus recently, especially after Hamas killed about 1,400 Israelis and took more than 200 people hostage last month. She's the lead sponsor of a House resolution urging President Biden to push for a ceasefire, and she's decried the Israeli military assault, which Palestinian health officials say has killed more than 10,000 people. In a tweet, she said that she can't be silent about what she labels as, quote, Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign. That characterization is rejected by most of her fellow Democrats, And the Israeli government says its aim is to destroy Hamas so it can never attack again, but that the group places fighters and bases among civilians. Biden's administration has said a ceasefire would give Hamas time to regroup and instead has urged the use of humanitarian pauses to allow aid and people to safely move within Gaza. Bush says her advocacy for a ceasefire is about saving lives.
Because the people of St. Louis did not send me to Congress to pacify people and to make people feel comfortable.
Bush won re-election in 2022 comfortably, fending off a primary challenge by a landslide. But last week, St. Louis County Prosecutor Wesley Bell made this startling announcement. He was withdrawing as a candidate for the U.S. Senate and instead running against Bush. While Bell stressed that his entry into the race went beyond Bush's statements on Israel, they did play a role.
And I think those comments show a lack of understanding of the nuance and complexities of an issue that is literally hundreds of years in the making.
Contrary to what Wesley Bell, her primary challenger, said in that NPR report, the situation is not really that complex. Now that we are sitting here, months on, 9 months or whatever from that interview, Bush's problem was simply that she was too early. It's not that she was wrong. Now, I will say from the outset, I believe that Hamas is a terrorist organization. I know that there has been some hubbub about Cori Bush being reticent to say that explicitly, but that's not really why she was targeted, right? Like, that's not really it. Anybody who is familiar with the history of the Palestinian struggle in Gaza understood exactly where this was going to go after October 7th. It just so happens that now we're sitting here and more people have caught on. This was published in the New York Times Magazine. It's called The Unpunished: How Extremists Took Over Israel. When I say that Netanyahu's government is filled with extremists who want to colonize Gaza, that is not my opinion. That is something that has been reported again and again in many different places. A great long form history of what is happening, the extra legal things that are happening in Israel with regard to colonization and the illegal settlements, the terrorism, flat out terrorism of the far right in Israel, of the Zionist far right. We understand that the Israeli Defense Force is allegedly, quotes, targeting reporters. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 113 journalists have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. That's the most in any conflict that they've covered since 1981. But as I mentioned before, the political landscape has shifted dramatically in April of this year after humanitarian workers were targeted by an Israeli airstrike and killed. Top Democrats encouraged there to be a pause in the transfer of weapons to Israel. Israel says that airstrike, that was an accident, and they subsequently fired the people who were responsible, but they have some of the most advanced weaponry in the world, the most advanced security systems and surveillance in the world. It's very unlikely, almost impossible, that was an accident. This is from the Washington Post. In May, the International Criminal Court charged Netanyahu with war crimes and crimes against humanity. This is the Washington Post report on the IDF's targeting of journalists. It's titled "Drone Footage Raises Questions About Israeli Justification for Deadly Strike on Gaza Journalists." This was published on March 19th, 2024. This is from Reuters. April 6, 2024, Pelosi joins call for Biden to stop transfer of U.S. weapons to Israel. From the Washington Post, May 20th, 2024, ICC prosecutor seeks arrest warrants for top Israeli Hamas figures. The ICC is the only permanent international court that wields power to prosecute individuals for genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. Its announcement Monday was historic. Although Israel is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, upon which the court is founded, the arrest warrants, if issued, would nonetheless stigmatize the country's senior leaders. Continued. Karim Khan, by the way, is the lead prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Khan said his office had reasonable grounds to believe that Netanyahu and Gallant were responsible for crimes including starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, willful killing, and murder, intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population, and extermination. These occurred, he said, after the imposition of a, quote, total siege of Gaza that involved, quote, completely closing the 3 border crossing points from 8th of October 2023 for extended periods, and later by arbitrarily restricting the transfer of essential supplies. This is from the Financial Times. So because they understood that there was going to be a lot of pushback to them issuing these arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu, the investigators, the lawyers at the ICC, they came together to issue an essay, an op-ed for the Financial Times. This is called Why We Support ICC Prosecution for Crimes in Israel and Gaza. And this is a cohort of lawyers, including Amal Clooney, George Clooney's wife. Okay. The panel also unanimously agrees that the evidence presented by the prosecutor provides reasonable grounds to believe that Netanyahu and Israel's Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. This includes the war crime of intentionally using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare and the murder and persecution of Palestinians as crimes against humanity. It is important to understand that the charges have nothing to do with the reasons for the conflict. The charges concern waging war in a manner that violates the long-established rules of international law that apply to armed groups and the armed forces in every state in the world. And of course, the warrant applications announced today are just the first step. The United States State Department has acknowledged that Israel's actions have the capacity to radicalize young Muslims and that it ultimately destabilizes the region. Moreover, that this is Gaza War, a recruiting boon for terrorists, U.S. intelligence shows, published July 5th, 2024. Moreover, this year, we have seen Benjamin Netanyahu frustrate even some of the most ardent Zionists, including Joe Biden, by repeatedly backing away from ceasefire deals. This is killing of Hamas leader fuels more tension between Biden and Netanyahu, published August 3rd, 2024, published by Peter Baker. This is a quote. The president's frustration over the fitful ceasefire talks came as, I don't wear my glasses for these live streams. Sorry, I can't see that good. I'm 35. The president's frustration over the fitful ceasefire talks came in as Israel's Channel 12 reported on Friday that Mr. Netanyahu had clashed with his own security chiefs, who accused him of changing the terms of the proposal to make it harder to reach a deal. The prime minister's office denied the report. Cori Bush got a lot of shit when she was at the State of the Union and she held up this sign. She just knew what it took many more months for other people to know, that Netanyahu and his genocidal regime were taking it too far, and they were doing it with the aid and approval of the United States. How can you see the videos of mangled, mutilated bodies? And I go out of my way to avoid this, but people very wantonly retweet and share and repost and whatever. But how can you see the videos of Israeli tanks rolling over bodies and not want to speak out and not know that something is wrong. And I do find it nuts that that has made her a target. It is not an extremist position. I do have some questions for Wesley Bell, the local prosecutor who dropped out of the Senate race to run against Cori Bush last fall. My first question is, what exactly motivated him to say vehemently that he would not run against her? I also have a question for Cori Bush. Now, what motivated her to make sure that she recorded that phone call? Because she must have felt something. But anyway, let's listen to the phone call.
Don't even think for even a second that that's the case. And I'm telling you right now, I'm telling you on my word, I ain't not running any shit.
Well,
That's not happening.
yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm gonna, but I want, like, I need other people to not think. And I think the reason why people are asking me about it is because it's what Steve Roberts did. He said he was running for one seat and then he switched at the end and ran, so.
I ain't no Steve Roberts.
I know you're not. I know you're not. But
Shar, that's my girl, that's your girl too.
Yeah.
Like, y'all my people. Like, I don't do that. I'm not doing
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah.
What I'm saying is, if they call you, just be like, don't even ignore that stuff. That's not true. That's trying to divide us. Because that's really what it is. And just to be real while we talking, if this was not to work out, my seat is up in 2 years, and that's what I've been running with. That's why this was such an opportune move for me to go statewide, because I'm not in the middle of my career.
Right.
Like, I'm 6 months in, so I'm like, let's go. Let's go.
No, absolutely, because you got that, you have that safety, which is good. But we still want you to.
I'll say this too, like, even if you wasn't in that space, like real talking, if you wasn't, I don't think I was one every 2 years. I don't know.
Look, it ain't no joke.
You constantly doing it. You think what now?
Look, it ain't no joke, but
just to be clear, you ain't that should be the last thing on your mind. That's not happening.
Yeah, well, yeah, I appreciate it.
Let me tell you about how my jaw was on the floor when I heard that phone call. The passion, the no, I would never do that. I would never do that. Who wants to run for a house seat every 2 years? I would Embarrassing. I'm embarrassed. Why are you not embarrassed? So that was Wesley Bell last summer on a phone call to Cori Bush after she had heard rumblings that he was going to run against her. They had a conversation and he repeated over and over again, no way, I'm not going to do that. It's not going to happen. He mentioned in that call Tashara. Tashara is Tashara Jones, the mayor of St. Louis. Tashara's my girl. But apparently that is not the first promise that Wesley Bell has broken. Allegedly, because, he is a prosecutor. He is an attorney. Can't really be getting sued, not in this economy. Bell became prosecutor of St. Louis County in 2018. He ran against Bob McCullough. Again, if you followed anything that happened in Ferguson after Mike Brown, you have heard the name Bob McCullough. He is the prosecutor who did not bring charges against Michael Brown's killer. A part of his platform, as Bell was running for St. Louis prosecutor to replace McCullough, he promised that he would bring charges against Michael Brown's killer. That did not happen.
I'm Mike Brown Sr. After the murder of my son, Wesley Bell promised to pursue justice for my family.
My brother deserved justice.
I feel like he lied to us. He never brought charges against the killer. He never walked the streets of Ferguson with me. He failed to reform the office. He used my family for power, and now he's trying to sell out St. Louis. He doesn't care about us.
Cori Bush does.
I'm Cori Bush, and I approve this message.
No, I'm not, the champion of the institutions of policing and prosecution in this country. But if you said you were going to do it, if you ran explicitly on the promise of doing it, allegedly, and then you get elected, and then you don't do it, So we heard a clip from an NPR interview where Bell at the end said that Cori Bush just did not understand a very complex history around the relationship between Israel and Gaza, and that was one of the reasons why he decided to withdraw from the Senate race and run against her for House. This year, as the political environment has changed around the conflict, he's shifted the talking points just a bit.
We've talked about this ad nauseum. In June, I was running for the Senate. I had no intent of running for Congress. And I've talked about that. And when I did announce that I was running for Congress, I answered this question. When I got around not only this district and folks in the district were imploring me to run for Congress, but also nationally. Folks in D.C. are telling me that, not only is the Congresswoman not doing a good job, but she's not working with folks, and she's not, and it's hurting the district because we're not getting the resources here that we could if we had a Congresswoman that works with their party, that works with the DNCC, that works with the Black Caucus, and reaches across the aisle.
Okay, first of all, that was a mess. Now, I'm just be honest with you. If you know you're about to be on live TV, I just feel like you got to get your talking points together. I mean, you know what? I guess. But it certainly doesn't seem like a coincidence that Wesley Bell's campaign was primarily funded by a group called the United Democracy Project. And United Democracy Project is a super PAC, a super political action committee. And that political action committee is ran by the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, aka AIPAC. AIPAC put a total of $8.5 million into a successful campaign for Bell to beat Bush. This was published this week. Wesley Bell defeats squad member Cori Bush. A pro-Israel group spent $8.5 million to help oust her. From the Associated Press. That $8.5 million combined with other money, including maybe $1.5 million from cryptocurrency groups, that brought Wesley Bell's war chest, his campaign financing for a Democratic primary, to $12 million. In total, that race, a Democratic primary in Missouri, $15 million was spent. That makes the Democratic primary for the 1st District of Missouri the second most expensive primary in U.S. history. But do you want to know what the most expensive primary in U.S. history was? Do you want to guess when it took place? It took place in June. AIPAC funded a $20 million race to defeat Jamal Bowman in New York's 16th district. And do you want to know what political stance Jamal Bowman took that made AIPAC pour $14.5 million into a primary? He supported a ceasefire in Gaza months before it became cool. But one of the more interesting things about the most expensive Democratic primary ever and the second most expensive Democratic primary ever is that AIPAC and the United Democracy Project, their super PAC, they didn't explicitly attack Bowman or Bush's stances on Gaza. because they understand that those stances would not resonate with voters. What they decided to do was attack Bush and Bowman by zeroing in on a vote against the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in 2021. The narrative was that these progressives, these radicals, were disrupting the progress of the Democratic Party, that they were obstructing Joe Biden by voting against him in his signature legislation.
Representative Bush was one of 6 Democrats to break with their party as it passed a $1 trillion priority of President Biden's. But Bush says that's just half of the story because it's just half of what Democrats had originally agreed on. She's pushing for another $1.75 trillion plan known as Build Back Better that, she says, would invest in human infrastructure, universal pre-K, elder care, and an extension of the enhanced child tax credit.
That extra $300 a month, that has helped so many people that have called into our office. If I would have said, yes, I will go along and only support this bipartisan infrastructure package, we would have lost the leverage to keep the other bill on the table.
You think not voting for it, do you feel like that leverage is real? Are you confident that the Congress is still going to take up and even pass Build Back Better?
I'm confident that because of that it's still on the table.
Critics of Build Back Better are attacking its historic spending on climate change, but Bush believes that, too, can make a difference in the lives of St. Louisans.
Do we want our children to keep leaving school, having to take off of school to go to the hospital for asthma? Or do we want to get control of the methane, the arsenic, the lead that's in our communities? Whether it is other moderate Democrats or whoever, they know that if it means the media is upset with me, if it messes up my name, St. Louis knows, and those moderate Democrats know that I won't stop fighting. Because for me, mediocrity is the enemy of progress.
Okay. I want to underscore that was a vote taken in 2021. Cori Bush had another election in 2022, and the vote did not come up as an issue. Moreover, before she took the protest vote along with the other progressives in order to maintain leverage to get the social spending, according to reporting from Mother Jones, she told her constituents what she was going to do and why she was going to do it. This is the disingenuous attack that progressives voted against the infrastructure bill. Bush and Bowman, wait a second, girl. Let me get my, come on. Bush and Bowman, alongside the other progressives, kept pushing to pass a fuller version that would give families a $3,600 annual child tax credit, establish a guaranteed free pre-K program, increase housing investments, supply tax-funded elder care, incentivize green energy development, and expand Medicare and Medicaid. At the time, Bush said this more robust plan would have benefited low-income residents of her district and people like herself, a Black single mother who spent time living in her car. What I find really disheartening about that is, before she took the vote, she did a district Zoom meeting. Megan Green, president of the St. Louis Board of Aldermen and a staunch Bush supporter, remembers. There were labor leaders on the call. There were a lot of elected officials on the call. And she said, I just want to talk through what we're doing and why I'm taking this vote this way. To kind of turn around and use that against her is really disappointing, Green continued. AIPAC chose that line of attack because they understood that the 1st District of Missouri is majority Black, and people just are not that deeply invested in the quote-unquote anti-Semitism of supporting a ceasefire. But majority Black districts are much more likely to be deeply Biden loyal and Democratic Party loyal. And by positioning that no vote as a radical fighting against the progress of the Democratic Party, a radical pushing against Joe Biden, even though Biden wanted to pass Build Back Better, That was the social aspect of it, was supposed to be his signature legislation. At one point, he even said that he did not want to separate the infrastructure part of the bill from Build Back Better. We can come back years later and say that Cori Bush was being obstinate, that Cori Bush was being needlessly rebellious, and that she is not the right person to represent the district. So, when I was reading up about this, of course, we understand the gist of what's happening and why it's happening. But I will tell you, I was particularly astonished to get to this quote from the New York Times. I just was not expecting the pro-Israel lobbyists or activists to be so explicit. Mark Mellman, this is from In Missouri, Cori Bush fights for survival against an AIPAC-backed Democrat. August 5th, 2024, Mark Mellman, a Democratic pollster and the president of Democratic Majority for Israel, said that Ms. Bush had been a target for years because of her stance on the country, but votes against popular Democratic initiatives made her more vulnerable this cycle. Quote, "We're taking advantage of that," he said. And even if the Israel-Hamas war is not a central concern in St. Louis, Mr. Mellman said, progressives like Ms. Bush, quote, "have chosen to make the issue central to them. That's a choice that they made," he said. "It's core to who they are." So there it is in black and white. And that pretty much explains why we have seen other members of the squad like AOC and Ayanna Pressley cling so tightly to Joe Biden, particularly during the period when there is debate about whether or not he would stay on the ticket. I found it to be weird. I found it to be strange, odd, when it was so clear that Joe Biden was not fit to be a candidate. Well, just at the very least, not fit to be a candidate. They were reading the room. They were reading the political landscape. My assessment is that they understood this line of attack and that they were worried that creating any space between them and Joe Biden creates an opening for attacks. It creates an opening for primary challenges. It creates an opening for this kind of disruption. And even if you are a great fundraiser, the way that AOC is a great fundraiser, that's still a pain in the ass if you want to keep your seat. Now, I will say this is not the only obstacle that Cori Bush has been battling. In the last couple of years, there was an allegation of mismanagement of campaign funds. But she was cleared of those allegations by the House. This is from the St. Louis Dispatch. Cori Bush cleared on complaint about campaign employment of husband. Thank you again. A complaint from a conservative group against U.S. Rep. Cori Bush, D. St. Louis, was dismissed Wednesday by an oversight committee. The Office of Congressional Ethics voted unanimously to dismiss the complaint filed March 3rd by the committee to defeat the president. Bush's campaign reported. Now, another outside group has refiled the allegations with the Department of Justice, so she is currently fighting that. Cori Bush decided that she needed security because she has reported experiencing being the victim of quote unquote credible threats to her life.
Prior to me entering Congress, I had a lot of threats on my life. I had even had times where there were actual, attempts made. Yeah. And I went to social media to talk about them because I didn't feel safe going anywhere else. So I would talk about what was happening to me on social media, sure. Even turned it into the FBI at one point, just making it documented that there are actual, threats on my life, attempts on my life. But even before I entered Congress, during orientation, I went to the House and talked about, hey, this is what I'm experiencing now. Yeah. Is there a way for you all to keep me safe in Congress?
And there are some members of Congress who are independently wealthy. Are you one of them?
No, I am not.
And that is the reason that you're trying to figure out a way to pay for it.
The Bowman-Bush issue is a lot bigger than AIPAC and United Democracy Project. There's some really good quotes in this article, and she says that today this system worked against me, but even the moderates should understand that tomorrow the system will work against you. The issue we're experiencing here and elsewhere in the United States is the enormous impact that rich people, big donors, corporations, special interests, all of the money that they can dump without accountability into elections in order to get the outcome that they desire. And it's gonna happen again and again and again. It's one of the things that keeps normal people out of politics. It's one of the reasons why the quote unquote progressive agenda is going to have so much difficulty gaining traction in the United States, because that lever can always be pulled. And even if you're not a ceasefire girly, you should be concerned about whoever wanting to pull the lever, pulling the lever. So as I mentioned, Cori ultimately lost her seat. She gave a little victory speech.
Pulling me away from my position as Congresswoman. All you did was take some of the strings off. Let's be clear. 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 Let's talk about what it really is. Because see, now I don't have to worry about some strings that I have attached, and as much as I love my job. But all they did was radicalize me, and so now they need to be afraid. So the thing is this. The thing is this. I don't think that anything, there is nothing that happens in my life that happens in vain. So if this happened, it's because it was meant to happen. And let me say, it's because of the work that I need to do. And let me say this, AIPAC, I'm coming to tear your kingdom down.
House seats are up every 2 years. I really hope that Cori Bush will run again in 2026. As I was reading about what's happening in Missouri, I came across a lot of stuff about the Missouri Freedom Caucus. Those crazy right-wing wackadoos of the Missouri Freedom Caucus, but the way that they were able to organize and create power